Oh my goodness me. What a pleasure.
Do you remember me?
Of course I remember you. Tell everyone who you are.
I am Michaela Pereira. I am host and anchor of Good Day LA in Los Angeles. And I am, I am such a fan of what you're doing, putting out into the world. I leapt at the chance to do this. How are you?
I'm so well, Michaela. It really is beautiful to see you here today. If I'm not mistaken, you used to work at CNN, right?
Did, yeah.
And I remember seeing you for years on CNN and thinking to myself that here is a lady who has a heart. Here is a lady who comes from a place of pureness and truth. And when I got the opportunity to be interviewed by you a few weeks back or months back now,
so great. It was so great.
Yeah, it was so great. Well, thank you so much for being willing to be on this show. Yeah?
I literally, when your team reached out to me, I was like, first of all, this is awesome. This is such a cool concept. And I have wanted to reconnect with you. And you know how life is. And also the pandemic pushed us apart, brought us together again from a distance. I was just really tickled that they thought of me and a chance to talk to you in a format that's way different from the type of format that we do in broadcast television, right?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
More freedom.
Indeed. So tell me, Michaela, how did you get started in journalism? I'll tell you a little story. As a kid, I actually wanted to be a journalist.
Really?
Now, it didn't actually happen, right? You could say in some way
You're telling stories, honey.
Exactly. I'm telling stories, right? But how did it start for you? What was that seed that brought you to where you are today?
It's really funny because when I look back on my life, I actually, you know how in retrospect you can see the path, but while you're on it, you don't. I look back now, and of course I was the kid that was on the debate team. I did the noon hour announcements from my elementary school. I wrote for the school paper. I was in student government. All of those things were there. But I hadn't put two and two together. And I was one of those kids that was really struggling to figure out. I knew there was purpose. I knew there was something that I was supposed to be doing, but I couldn't see it. And I used to describe it as being in the presence of something, but there's fog in the way and you can't see it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I could sense this. I'm a person of faith. So I knew God had a plan for my life, but I was like, wait, I had a lot of friends that were going off to, I'm going to be a nurse. They already knew. I'm going to be a lawyer. I'd like to travel. And I just didn't have a clear indication. So it took kind of the universe, God, whatever you choose to believe in, grabbing me by the shoulders and saying, listen, dummy, here's an opportunity. And it really was. To make a really long story short, I was putting myself through school in Canada. I'm Canadian. Putting myself through school in Canada, 16 part-time jobs, and still like broke and eating tuna fish and top ramen all the time. And my roommate at the time was a model, and she was making all sorts of googobs of cash modeling, like legit modeling. And she kept saying to me, you should do this, you should do this. I was a thinking woman. My parents taught me to believe that the contents of my heart and my head were more important than the outward. And I sort of poo-pooed it. And then, I got real hungry. So I started just doing little, fashion shows around town. I was in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada at the time. And we got an audition. I got called to an audition for a TV public service announcement on diversity. I was like, oh, this one I can do. This one I could totally do. That producer saw something in me, a woman, probably only about 5 years my senior, but at the time, you remember this, when you're in your early 20s, anybody even like a few years older than you seemed like they had everything together, right? Mm-hmm. She seemed so sophisticated and so knowledgeable and so worldly that I listened to everything she said. And she really advised me. She's like, you should really consider a career in television. Yeah, remember the time, you remember the early 90s? It wasn't like it is today. It wasn't reality shows and YouTube channels and Instagram Live. Somebody suggesting to me that I should consider a career in television was like, you might as well go to the moon. It didn't make sense. I thought it was very nice of her. I just kind of disregarded it. She didn't. A year later, she came to me. They had a afternoon around town show that one of the hosts was going on vacation, and they needed somebody to fill in. And they immediately thought of me, which makes zero sense. I had 30 seconds of television experience behind me. But they asked me to come down and audition, and that's kind of the start. The rest is history.
It's amazing how something that can shape the rest of your life can be something so small, right?
And let me tell you something that's really funny about it is that I'm very different. I live my life very differently now. But at the time, I am still very earnest, but I was so earnest. And I was one of those kids that had this 5-year plan. And I was doing this. It felt like I had this really rigid future goal. I wanted to be a translator, and I wanted to work for the UN. That's what I wanted. And that's what I was on the road to. But it's like that God had a different plan and said, no, that's not the purpose I have for you. And literally put this opportunity in front of me. And I remember calling my dad thinking, these people are crazy. Why are they trying to give me this opportunity? So the part I didn't tell you, after doing the job for a week for fill-in, the host that I was filling in for had gone to Costa Rica. She decided not to come back. And they looked at me and said, you want the job? And I remember thinking, you people are insane. I've got this whole plan. I'm supposed to be going this way. And I remember calling my father, who kind of slapped some sense into me, reminding me that I had made $11,000 the year before, and that these people were going to actually pay me a salary to do something that I seemed to enjoy and have an affinity for, which I didn't think I did. And it was really guilt, if I'm perfectly honest, that kind of made me take the job. But it probably took me about a year of just being terrified. Terrified, Neil. When I tell you I was terrified, I didn't know what I was doing. And I also knew that I didn't look like the people that folks were used to seeing on TV. I was the wrong shape. I was the wrong color. And we got hate mail to that end. But all that hate mail did was make me say, oh, really? Okay, you watch. You watch. And I dug in. And 25 something years later, I'm still here.
Wow. What does it feel like when someone sends you hate because of the color of your skin?
You know, it's interesting. I was so young and so green. And I remember being a bit like a golden retriever puppy. They're just so floppy and darling and a mess, right? And I had that kind of energy. And I remember that letter stopped me in my tracks. Here's the other part about it. It was 3 pages, handwritten, single-spaced, both sides of the paper. It wasn't just like a scrawled one-liner. This person sat down with intention. I worked with a man who was a big, jovial man at the time, my beloved Gord. His name is Gordy Tupfer. And the letter was addressed to the fat man in the dark. I should have not opened it, but I did. And part of me is happy that not happy. That's never a word. I'm proud of myself for opening it because I think I needed to know that there is that in the world. It had the capacity to shred me. And I remember sitting there with it, bawling. And I called my mom. And my mom, who is a wise, wonderful, authentic human that I just feel so lucky to have been raised by. She said to me, Michaela, because I think they worried about me going into this industry, rightly so. And she said, at some point along the way, someone is going to send you a letter like that. But then there are going to be other people who decide to name their firstborn babies after you and want to invite you to prom and give you awards. And what I want you to do is sit right there in the middle. Because if you start to believe either end of that spectrum, you got to stay right in the middle. So I took that letter and I burned it in the kitchen sink and I released it. Yes, it's still talking about it to you. I haven't thought about that letter in a long time. But I released it, I released it.
As you shared that story, literally for the past, I don't know how many minutes it was, 3, 4, 5 minutes, I've had goosebumps the entire time, right? And you said something really powerful, which is kind of how I live my life as well. You can't truly understand the light until you truly understand the darkness, right? Yeah. So that I've traveled the world a lot, and I've seen a lot of good and a lot of bad. Yeah. I've walked through the cobbled streets of Auschwitz, and I've been inspired by people on mountaintops in the middle of India. And I wouldn't have been able to had those highs and connect to my humanity unless I had seen those lows, right? And clearly receiving a letter like that is just not acceptable. Mm-hmm. At the same time, you can take receiving a letter like that, keep your humanity intact, mm-hmm. share your love, mm-hmm. and never forget that letter, but forgive the person that sent it.
Tender.
Right?
Yes. No, absolutely. Because what I have learned is that there is a weight, right? There's a weight to carrying that around. That's why I had to release it. I often do that in a meditation or in a prayer. I sort of wrap up whatever that thing is, if it's a jealousy bubble or if it's a, petty bubble or a fear bubble, and just sort of wrap it up and release it. Because we all have been weighted down, right? I mean, we're learning so much more now about trauma, right? We're learning to sort of cast away shame. And I'm so glad of this paradigm shift that I feel sort of the beginning stages of. We're having these conversations more. My mom often quotes me, the Leonard Cohen bit, that that's how the light gets in, those cracks, that painful stuff. That's how the light gets in. And I believe it. I don't choose to stay there because I'm always seeking the light, right? And I'm seeking joy. It's not, and again, I used to think that I was just maybe a Pollyanna. It's not that I don't know. Look, I work in news. I see it all the time. But here's the thing I fundamentally believe that news is supposed to tell you what is new, right? The new information. And the new information isn't just devastation and destruction and hate. There are things happening, really powerful, incredible things happening. There are conversations to be had about people making changes in neighborhoods and in cities and in countries. That's what I'm trying where I can to make sure we shine a light on those stories, because I can't believe, and I won't believe, and I won't, I no longer want to use the light force that is in me for darkness,
So how do you protect yourself when specifically, because I know you now work in local news, right? Mm-hmm. And when I turn on the local news, 99% of the time, something terrible's happened, right? Yeah. You could say the same thing about national news. In a minute. But how do you protect yourself? And not just how do you protect yourself as a journalist working in the news, but as a human being,
right? Yeah.
But as a human being,
Mm-hmm.
How do you protect yourself, your heart, your energy, your love, your compassion, your humanity?
It is a lot of work. That is the lift for me. That is the lift, because I am not doing things the way I used to, and I am not approaching them. I'm 51 years old now. You know, when you travel a bit, you start to realize, okay, that didn't serve me, or this isn't working. I've got to find another way to do it. I was thinking about throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I took a break after my last job. After CNN, I was at HLN, their sister station, for 2-3 years. I had my own show. And then I was, as they say in the business, on the beach for about 1.5 years. And I was like, okay, I think it's time. Yet deeply inside me, I knew it wasn't. But I couldn't figure out how to do exactly what you're talking about. I guess I'm a bit of an empath. I am a sponge. I feel people's energies. I absorb all of this. I do what I can to not, I know it's going to sound crazy, but I'm not on Twitter all the time. I'm not watching cable news in my home. I manage the amount of flow in. I know how to get my news and information. I choose when I do it. I'm very careful to use a method that I know isn't triggering to me. And then I also create a space. My home is my sanctuary. My friends and my partner are all very supportive and understanding of the fact that I have to turn off, right, from that and unplug from it. I do a lot of work spiritually to protect myself. I do a lot of meditation. I start my day in prayer and I end my day in prayer. And basically the commute, which, you know, in Los Angeles, no joke. Although I go in at 4:00 in the morning, so it's not as much of a commute. But in that time, I'm in prayer and thanksgiving. And for those of you that aren't believers and just think that but I'll tell you, it is what is helping me do this. I fill my cup up as much as I can. I know who I am. I know whose I am. And so when I go into broadcast, I try to do my best. And I did some work with somebody. You know, I remember several years ago, after the horrifying Vegas massacre, it hit home in Los Angeles because of the adjacency to Vegas, right? Everybody pops over there for the weekend or whatever. And so people go back and forth. A lot of people have family there or are from there. So that Vegas thing hit hard. And I think it hit anybody that loves live music and loves going to let their hair down. And it felt like freedom was snatched from us, right? It was devastating. And it was very difficult for us to have to cover. And they brought in a therapist. I was really pleased that they did that. And I made a point, because I was drowning. I made a point of going down and making an appointment and walk down the hall in plain sight, because I also knew there was value in people seeing me, the anchor, walk down the hall towards the psychologist's office, because I wanted them to know we can't do this. You know, it's not just, think about this. It's not just us, the anchors, that are having to deliver the information of this atrocity. Think about the editor who's having to cut repeatedly that videotape. The camera guy that's out there talking to the victims who managed to escape with their life. I fully believe that the journalist community, I think, put them in there with police and law enforcement of having PTSD, bystander trauma at the very least. The man that I spoke to, I remember telling him, we talked about the Vegas thing, and I told him it had sort of been compounding, and he reminded me that trauma is compounding, right? Unless you deal with it and address it, It stacks, baby. It stacks. And I had told him about Ferguson and talking to Michael Brown's mom and Trayvon's mom and interviewing them and going down to Charlotte. And I said, I stand with these people in their grief. And I feel, you a Harry Potter guy?
Somewhat.
The Dementors that would come in and suck the soul out of somebody?
Yes,
I felt as though standing in their grief with them, my life force draining away. And every time I did a story, more and more was sucked out, and more and more. And I just felt myself being pounded into the ground. And my bright light felt like it was dimming. That terrified me. And he told me, and this has helped me tremendously. He reminded me, he said, Michaela, you have to remember, these are human beings put on this earth to have their experience, as painful as it is. But they are fully realized human beings. You cannot take that experience from them. You can stand with them, but you do not need to stand in their grief. Stand with them, bear witness to it. That gave me a permission as an energetic, empathic person. It gave me permission, and it's changed how I've been able to do things. I think of myself because I am a heart-centered person, just like you are, Leon, and so we connect. But I can't plug into every situation. I can plug into the person. I can be there and link arms, but I don't have to plug into the situation. That was big.
Again, goosebumps, right? Because, in some way, you just answered why I wanted to be a journalist. And I wanted to be a journalist to experience the good, the bad, humanity at its finest, humanity at its worst, and to touch a life in as positive a way as I could, right? And, I remember Ferguson, and I remember watching all of this on TV. And to have actually been there and to have talked to these kids' parents and to be in the center of the grief, right?
To be fair, it was after some time they came to our studio, and I got to talk with them outside of there, which is a huge difference. I have a colleague who goes to those hotspots in the moment. She's one of the correspondents who is there. It's the kind of correspondent you would be. You would go to the hotspots. I know I can't do that. And to some people, that'll seem like I'm weak. And to some people be like, oh, you just like to sit there in that hermetically sealed studio. That's where I need to be. I know myself. I know the conversations that I can have. We have other people that are meant to be out there, right? The correspondents that are meant to be in the war zone, the correspondents that are meant to be in the points of strife, at the wildfires. That is not who I am. That is not my path, and that is not my purpose.
Well, you know what your purpose is and what your path is, and that's
Figured
the one
it out.
that you have to follow, right?
Work in progress, baby. Work in progress.
You mentioned about the therapist and the psychologist that you went to see. I always tell people that they need to share their pain, and that if you don't share your pain will consume you. And if you don't share your pain will destroy you.
Can we just talk about what we're seeing right now? I think the unseen pandemic we are in and going to experience is this isolation, right? That people have been put into out of necessity, right? Out of necessity is the best way we could protect ourselves during the pandemic. The grief 700,000 American lives lost plus. So think about 700,000 families, right? Some of them multiple people in a home gone. Not at Thanksgiving, not at Christmas. There is grief. Businesses shut down. There's grief. There's unresolved trauma. That pain, I think we're seeing desperate people in desperate times. That's why the light bearers have to brilliantly shine their lights, Leon. My sweet.
It's true. And sometimes the light bearers need help too, right?
Right. No, isn't that the truth? So I have this little beam of light friend. Her name's Liz. And she is electric. She is magnetic. She is in a tiny little package, but there's this just beam of energy that exudes from her, and people are drawn to her, and people were lifted up by the work she does. And every once in a while she calls me, or I call her. We have to lean on each other. We have to have mind melds like this, right? We have to seek out that stuff. We have to. Oh goodness, we have to. We'd be lost without it.
I would go so far as to say you say the word mind meld, but I would say it's really heart meld.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
And this conversation that you and I are having is not coming from the mind.
Oh, it's coming from the spirit and the heart and the soul. 100%.
Exactly, 100%. Right?
Yeah, all the good gooey bits.
Yeah. So going back to your time at CNN, what would you say was the one defining story that touched you the most?
There were many. Oh, there were many. There was a couple. You know, the stuff that always gets me, and still is, and it's the yummy stuff that I love being able to feature in my work today. And it's not going to be lost on you why. People in spaces thriving where they've not been welcomed, allowed, told they don't matter. I spoke with a transgender woman who is a former Marine, big, strappy, burly man of a Marine. She transitioned, and I got to talk to her, one of the bravest humans I've ever met. I met a young man oh my God, I remember this so distinctly. And I'm not giving you names because I talk to 12,000 people every day, and I don't want to misquote the names, but the spirit of the person is all that matters. I talked to a young man who had been radicalized and had gone overseas to the Middle East, to Afghanistan, I want to say. And somehow, some way, by the grace of all of the gods, he found his way out and became de-radicalized and was doing all of this work, because there was a time, you remember, there was all this time where there were these domestic cells of people getting radicalized here and there. And he was helping to sort of help us understand what the draw was, right? And talking to this young man to see this incredible shift and change in his heart was super impactful, because I remember at a time we were all living in such fear, right?
And what made him shift out of, let's say, the darkness?
There was something that had happened, and I wish I could remember, because I remember specifically, and I hate that I can't. It's funny how my brain works. I remember the courage. I remember their faces. I remember the impact they had on me and on the story. And yet some of the details fade. And it's very interesting that that's what remains, you know? But I wish there was some sort of event that had happened, and I wish I could remember the details of it. I'm going to follow it up, and I'm going to email you.
All right, let me know. So I don't want to get political, but I do want
Let's
to
not,
ask you.
because I detest politics.
Yeah. But
Detest.
I do want to ask you from a heart-centered place
Sure.
what it is. Like, there seems to be a lot of chaos, right? Whether it's left, right, is not relevant. There's a lot of chaos.
Yeah.
And this predated the pandemic.
For sure.
Right? So I have difficulty. I try not to watch the news, but I am a closet political junkie.
Junkie?
Right? Yeah.
You're not alone, honey. There's a bunch of people like that.
Yeah. But I try my best not to watch it. But
Yeah.
I end up watching it. What is happening? Is this something that has been going on forever? Or it just seems different? I mean, I'm a student of history. It just seems different. I don't know.
It's funny because we're living it, I feel like it feels different. And by the way, it is different from what we've experienced. I think we're about a similar vintage.
Yeah.
And it is different from what we've experienced, right, in our lifetimes. But, if you go back to the civil rights era, when you think about all of the unrest that was going on, all of those assassinations kind of seemingly in a row, and what it threw the nation into. Women are struggling to vote. Black people are fighting for our rights to be fully, accepted as humans, dignified as humans. When you think about all that was going on, it must have felt chaotic then. And it must have also, because to me, those moments of chaos also seem to precipitate, they are part of a seismic shift, a paradigm shift. Think about that, right? That movement, that change that thrust us into sort of more modern life of, more equity, on the path to more equity, on the path to more acceptance. I don't know. I marvel at it. Like you and I think we have the benefit being, Canadian and British, living in America and seeing it. It defies logic. I don't think it happened all at once. I think it was a slow build. I think each time, it builds upon each other. The part that I get disheartened with is the absolute divisiveness and that, there's no way out. If you ever sit with somebody who's just super stubborn, they just have a feeling about something and there's no budging them. It's just infuriating. We got two sides that are that way. How you can't find middle ground, but the system seems set up to just sort of exist that way, right? It isn't meant to find moderation. It isn't meant to find middle ground. Everybody just sort of digs their heels in even further. It doesn't seem like a way to live or be, or I don't know. I can't answer it. I have been mystified by it myself. And it disheartens me. And it's part of the reason why I abhor politics, because I just don't see that it's helping every man and woman and child.
Yeah. How do you, for the people listening today, clearly you've been through a lot, right?
Not bad.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are some people who have been through a lot who are listening in, right?
Yeah.
So we touched on it a little bit. What specific advice would you give someone who is feeling completely overwhelmed, whether it's the pandemic, whether it's family related, whatever it is related to? Because you've told me and those who are listening that there's a way that you do it, right? And in a simple format, what would you say to someone listening that needs a little bit of help?
First of all, I love you. If you can let that sink in for a second. because I can say that to you, that proves to you there's love in the world. And if there's love in the world, that means there's equanimity. It isn't all just that. It can feel that way, right? It can feel that way, that everything, and then your brain gets going and starts to feed into it and point out all the things, right? That old tape starts running, and you have to stop it and sort of flip the script. When it has happened to me, when it feels like everything is falling apart, and then outside in the world, it feels like it's falling apart. And then your tape starts running in your head. I stop myself and I get out my book. It's a journal. It's a gratitude journal. I was annoyed by it at first. And then I started writing in it. On one page, I wrote 5 things I was grateful for. And I really considered it. Some days it was just the warm blanket on my knees while I was reading a cup of tea. Sometimes it was a really great conversation with my mom that day. Sometimes it was just the feeling of the sun beating on my face. This was during the pandemic. Those are things that I could have. And then on the other page, I just wrote. I'm not really a great writer. I just did stream of consciousness, but I put it down. And at some point in my life, it will be a bit of a diary of what went on during the pandemic. But I did that every day. And all of that gratitude started to change things for me. I still do it. I still do it. I stay in gratitude. And it is hard. I hear you. It is hard. It is hard. So gratitude for me is one thing. Breathing is another. And also, this is going to sound annoying, but I found tremendous help in breath. Sitting down, breathing in for 4, holding it for 7, slowly releasing for 8, and doing it again. And suddenly I found that my shoulders dropped a little bit. My breathing was regulated. My heart wasn't racing. I wasn't sweating. Those are 2 things that I've done to sort of downregulate myself, to remind myself that as chaotic as it is, as a person of faith, I believe that there is purpose. As a person who believes that the universe is here to support us, isn't just here to crap all over us and leave us weeping in a ditch. There is parity, there is equilibrium in the universe. When someone is taken from us, another place in the world, a baby is born with hope and expectation. I have to believe that. Seek out your light sources. Fill your Instagram feed with good stuff. Watch a comment. Watch I Love Lucy. Read a book that makes you feel good. Listen to music, because that music, little Chris Stapleton, lift your soul right up. Play something, make something, do something. That usually gets me out of my funk.
That was a truly beautiful answer. And, you and I have only ever met once on a set in LA. Actually, I wasn't even on set.
In a Zoom.
On a Zoom, right?
Yep.
But it's weird. I'm telling you, I remember you from CNN. I remember your presence. I remember your heart. I remember it. And when a member of my team said, "Do you want to go on Michaela's show in LA?" I was like, absolutely. Yeah. And this leads me maybe to the final question. And that, I don't even know if it's a question. Maybe it's a bit of a statement. I've watched a lot of news, right? Mm-hmm. And the majority, I'm going to mention any names, the majority of the anchors that I see, it seems that they are not in touch with their humanity. Okay? Mm-hmm. Yet you are still in touch, even after being pummeled, right, by the negativity of our world. That's the business you're in. Let's be honest, right? It's every day.
Yeah.
And I say that because if you can do it, then so can everyone who's listening. And that's the truth. Yeah. And I would say that you have made a choice. Your choice is, to the best of your ability, to wake up with a smile, to go and live from a place of your humanity and our shared humanity. That's a choice you made.
Choice.
Many of us do not make that choice.
Can I tell you one last story?
Yes.
I remember there was a time when I started in my career, my two guides, two incredible mentors, women, told me the best thing you can do, Michaela, is to be yourself authentically on the air. It sounds like the easiest thing. It's also the hardest thing for young journalists to do, and maybe even people that come to television or broadcasting later in life. It is a very difficult thing because the system will tell you you're to this, to that, to this, to that. You'll get hardened by the news, etc. I found that happening when I got to San Francisco, probably around 1998, around 2000. I could feel this shell getting harder. I could feel a hardness to me. I was cranky, dare I say bitchy. I was edgy. I was unhappy. It isn't who I am, but I saw it happening. And I remember a friend, and it made me so mad at the time. I don't know what the scenario was, but she simply asked me, she just simply said to me, "You can choose to be happy." And I remember being like, "How? Like what? What does that even mean?" And then I was like, "Oh, wait." And that was this turning point. It really was. I remember it was a turning point. I remember deciding I can't let this, because I felt it. I felt it kind of trying to close up, but I caught it just before the final seal. And I look, humanity is messy. I'm messy. I'm cranky. I am imperfect. I cuss. I swear. I do all, but I choose joy. I choose happiness. I choose to live authentically, warts and all, but I have to keep my humanity center of who I am in what I do, or I can't do it anymore.
Thank you for saying that. And I'll tell you why. Because I can relate. I can relate to kind of feeling like I'm encrusted in something that I don't want to be encrusted in.
Right?
That I'm like just going through the motions. Mm-hmm. And that I have to turn on in certain moments, and the other moments I'm just going to be an angry Englishman, right? And to hear that from you, to hear that you went through that, and you chose not to go down that path as often as you could, kind of is like, first of all, it gives me permission to be kind to myself, to be like, okay, she had that problem too, right?
And sometimes we have to make this choice every day. Right? There's a lot of reason to be cranky. There's a lot of reason to be mad. Neighbors too loud. You're waiting 4 hours for your AT&T window and they don't show up at all. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for us to be mad. You lost your job. You didn't get the raise. You were looked over. Somebody breaks your heart. There's a lot of reasons to be mad, and we should feel it. Anger is an authentic human emotion, but it's if we choose to stay in it, right? I don't want to live in that. Ugh. That old saying, they get more bees with honey. There's truth to that too, right? The more I leave the drama. My friendships I want them there. They can be complicated too, but I bring people that don't deplete me into my life. I keep them in my life. I keep those people close to me. I keep those relationships precious. I feed them, right? They feed me. I feed them.
Michaela, I could literally have this.
Oh, we could talk all day. This podcast is like 24/7, right? Like,
but what I would love to do,
yes,
is to take you and your partner with my partner to a restaurant of your choice in Los Angeles and continue this conversation.
Bring it, honey. Bring it. Oh, we like some food.
Yes. Beautiful. All right. Well, look, like I said, it was really a pleasure. There is some connection. I'm telling you, I watched you on CNN all those years ago. I never forgot you. I never forgot you.
Wow.
My heart never forgot you. And when I heard that I was going to be on your show, I was like 1 billion%. And here we are again. I had no idea you were going to be on this show, right? I mean, I'm like, no idea.
I was so excited. I thought this was good. I was like, is it like The Masked Singer? Like, do I go in I had no idea what to expect. This was a really cool, this is such a great way to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Leon, I just support everything you do. I wish you nothing but goodness. You call me anytime you need me. And I'm just cheering you on, brother. I'm just cheering you on.
Thank you so much. And I will message you and we'll go out for that dinner.
You better.
And thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Be well.
Bye. Hello everyone, it's Leon here, aka the Kindness Guy. If you like my videos, which I hope you do, don't forget to press the subscribe button and also to ring the little bell so that the notifications notify you that I have a new video out in the world.